Okay, so I'd like to welcome Anish Kumar. I've tried my best to wake them up. I'll leave it to you. So he is a senior architect at Capgemini with over 20 years of experience. He likes sharing his expertise over various platforms. We are very glad he has picked KCD also to share his expertise with us. Over to you. Thanks.
Namaskaram. So, Robin tried his best to wake you up, and I'll try my best to make you sleep. Does that work? Okay, let's start. So, welcome to KCD, Kerala. This is my first visit to KCD, Kerala, and hopefully, if there is a lot of enthusiasm, I may come back. So, let's wait for that to happen. Let's move on. How many of you have heard about Skaffold? I see one raised hand. Anyone else? Nope. How many developers are here in this group? Okay, lot many. So, good. Let's start. Can someone explain what is a dev process? Dev process, development process. Anyone? If not, let's try to get back into the agenda of the call. Since we are in DevOps track, how should an engineer build a solution and ensure that it goes into right environments? So typically what happens is there is source code management, that is GitHub or Bitbucket or any solution of your choice. As a developer, we end up doing code changes, test it and commit it. Do we all agree? Yes. Once these changes are committed into source code management, the actual process starts, which talks about detect the source code changes, which is done typically by different hooks of your CI/CD orchestrator. Once it detects the change, it moves forward, starts and creates a build for or image out of the new code. Once that is done, tests should be carried out in order to ensure the build is successful or it has some failures. Once the test of images is completed, the process is to create an artifact which can be certified and moved to higher environment or any environment of the choice. Am I audible at the back as well? Perfect. Thank you for that confirmation. Since we moved from tagged artifact, the next one is, how many of us work in Kubernetes space? Okay, lot many, right? So everyone would confirm that without any manifestation, these images are worthless. Do we agree here? So that is where render manifest comes into play, and we need to utilize these manifest in order to make a deployable package which can be deployed on any environment. So that is a typical DevOps process or a dev process in nutshell. Any questions so far? If not, then I have a question for everyone. So typically during a development process, how often do you have to build your image in order to validate smaller changes? Any ballpark number? Once, twice, 10 times, or with every change that you do, you might have to recreate the image. Is there an agreement on this statement of mine? Yes. So in order to deploy a Kubernetes deployable artifact, you need to build it first and then deploy it and follow the same process, right? But don't we think it is going to be a lot of wastage of time in order to build the images and then certify it and then deploy it? So there is a lot of efforts or wasted by the development team in case there is no pipeline in place to carry out these activity, right? So in order to optimize this, let's go through a smaller demo which talks about or will give you a gist of what I'm going to present in subsequent slides. Okay. So switching tab. Okay. This is a brief intro of what Skaffold is. Please pay attention at the last. It will give you a clue of how Skaffold helps us remove these wastage. So this is the process which I'm going to speak about in subsequent section, but have a look at the video, and unfortunately I could not make one live video. So here you see kubectl get pods, we don't have any. We do the scaffold dev, which creates the image for the first time and it makes the service available. On the right hand side you see the application is throwing output as hello John. Now if we have to make a smaller change and then the process needs to continue. So with on the left hand side you must see there was a small change that was carried out and a statement from John to David was done, and without any build it was reflecting in the local development environment. So this gives us immediate feedback of our changes that has been carried out, and we can certify that the certain activity which we were working upon is completed and we can move forward, right? So that was about the brief demo. Going back to the slides. Before I start talking about the slides again, any questions on the demo? If not, let's try and understand what Skaffold is. Skaffold is a client-side utility open sourced by Google, which helps us in building, pushing and deploying application on different environment and helps developer focus on the development activities rather than wastage of time in building, deploying and so on and so forth, which was presented in the demo as well. So a couple of key features why we should think about Skaffold. Skaffold is a lightweight client-side utility which doesn't need to be installed on Kubernetes, or any component of Kubernetes doesn't need to be altered in order to have the Skaffold running. The next one is works everywhere. So I will show you if you have a source code management with the right source, with the right manifests, it will help you move from one platform to another platform easily with smaller tweaks. That is doable. It is feature rich. It gives a lot of capabilities in order to tag your images based on policy, so on and so forth. And then the optimized development part, which we saw in the quicker feedback for the changes. So these are the high level features which Skaffold offers. I'll take a pause and check if there is any questions. If not, let's move forward. This is a typical workflow which Skaffold implements internally. and especially look at the yellow box. A typical workflow is similar to what we saw in the earlier dev process. So detect the source code changes, build the artifact, and Skaffold supports different building mechanisms like Dockerfile, Bazel, JLib, and it can do this build locally, remotely, over cloud, or in cluster. So these are key capabilities that are available with Skaffold. Once the artifact is built, tests should be executed. Once tests are through and the build is certified, it can be pushed into artifact, and different type of mechanism for tagging the artifact is based on commit, SHA, so on and so forth. Once the artifact is ready, it should be pushed, and once it is pushed, it is ready for deployment. The yellow part which I was talking about, it talks about the sync process which we saw in the demo, wherein with smaller change in the code base, it was automatically reflecting on the pod without restarting the pod or scaling down the pod or rebuilding the image. That is the beauty of using Skaffold. The only challenge with using Skaffold is, or not challenge, the limitation would be the changes which do not require compilation doesn't have to go through the build cycle, and it will start reflecting immediately. Whereas if a Java code is changed, it will have to go through the compilation cycle and build cycle in order to be deployed. So we need to be cognizant enough of the situation that we should not anticipate Skaffold will automatically start giving us the feedback or the newer changes immediately. So that is one key takeaway from this session for everyone to be remembered going forward. Just a moment. That was about the workflow. Any questions?
One question.
Can you start with your name, please?
My name is Ajay.
Yeah, please go ahead, Ajay.
The doubt is, so what is happening here? The image is getting overwritten every time?
No. Typically, if it's a smaller change which doesn't require image compilation or build, it will automatically, the files which are changed will automatically get copied into the pod.
Okay.
And that is how it starts reflecting. Whereas in the situation where compilation, Java code, which requires compilation, there has to be an image rebuilt and deployed. But it is not developers' responsibility to do that. With right kind of setup, Skaffold will automatically do that for you.
Yeah, so like why this doubt? Because suppose if you want to roll back or something.
A rollback can always be done. You should not be using Skaffold for your, it should always be utilized in your dev environment and promoting certified artifacts onto higher environment, right?
Yeah.
So if you are thinking of rollback, so you always have the artifact version which can be redeployed or utilized for rolling back to the previous state.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yep.
Hi Anish, I'm Anup.
Hi Anup.
So pushing to artifacts, so does it mean the scaffold is going to push it to our image repository every time?
Yes, that kind of configuration needs to be defined first.
Okay.
Because Skaffold doesn't know what is your artifactory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless there is a definition, information available around that, it cannot do magic on its own. So you need to define those.
And by default, it doesn't push to the artifactory, but it just pushes the image to the Kubernetes. Where does the image go? actually?
So there are multiple artifactories, right? JFrog is one of them, Nexus is one of them. You need to define, or let's take the case of GCR, Google Container Registry. So these are your artifactory storage space. So you need to define which is your product, which product are you using to store the images, and then define that. Based on that definition, it will start pushing your latest generated images into that artifactory. It could be your local registry as well, but depends on your use case.
And maybe last question.
Yes, please.
Do we need to install something on the Kubernetes for that the scaffold works?
No.
No.
That is what I said. It is a client-side utility. So since we are talking about development process, everything remains on either your development server or your laptop.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, we have one question or raised hand from the back or center.
So is this like it will be installed in the Git where when we push the changes, it will detect that and copy the files to our image?
Could you repeat your question and start with your name, please?
Okay, sorry. My name is Guna. I work as a backend developer. So I at IBM. So I just wanted to understand if this gets installed as a webhook in Git and it detects the changes, and whenever there is a change in the files, it will copy that to the image?
No.
It doesn't work.
No. It always looks into your local storage, not into GitHub. So it because you are not making changes in GitHub unless you commit it, right?
Yeah.
So whatever gets changed on your local system will automatically get synced, and you get the immediate feedback of the changes.
Okay, so in some way it needs to have the Kubernetes config to be able to copy the files into the pod, right?
So that is Skaffold's responsibility.
Configure. Okay. If our file is like I've written code, I've done some changes. Mostly, let's say my pod is running with a binary, right? So I have to build the binary and keep it, and then it will copy it. It won't build it.
So when you do the scaffold init or scaffold run, the first activity that scaffold does is it brings up your pod once, and it continues to listen into your local folder, which has been defined into the scaffold manifest, that is scaffold.yaml, and it will check if there is a recent change. So the webhook which you are talking about from the GitHub perspective, similar implementation is within Scaffold, which listens into the recent changes and tries to push it into your running pod.
Okay. Last question, I'm sorry. This, you said listens, so it's not, the time in which I do the changes is not defined. So is it manually triggerable? Like I might...
No. You don't have to do any manual activity. It will continuously monitor.
It will keep on. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, in the interest of time,
I think we'll keep the rest of the questions.
Yes,
Firstly.
for the last. But good questions. Thank you. Moving forward, let me have my eyes back. So these are different references that are available, which would be available after the KCD session. So Scaffold, scaffold.dev is the site, Scaffold documentation, there is a sample implementation, and K-Sync is another utility in similar lines to Scaffold. So if anyone is really interested in utilizing these products, they can go through that. So that was the references part. Let's go back to another window. Okay, F11. So this is one of the sample repositories or sample code which I was trying to get up and running for the demo part, but unfortunately I could not. So I will walk everyone through the different key components that are required for Scaffold to run. So scaffold.yaml. That is the primary definition which Scaffold continues to listen into. So on top, so this application was has couple of one is front end, another is back end. So you would see the definition for both. So image, which image needs to be utilized in order to create the base image, and then what is the context. So you need to define the folder where the code is going to get changed. So you need to define it here. On similar lines, there is a definition for front end as well. So source back end and source front end helps us helps Scaffold understand these are the folders which it needs to monitor continuously. Once that definition is done, then there is deploy aspect. How it carries out the deployment is defined in this manifestation. Once that and yep, that was about it. Let's go back to k8s. These are the manifest files which will help Scaffold carry out the different activity like build, deploy, and manifest. So let's take a look at the backend deployment YAML and the service YAML. So this is the deployment YAML and the definition for what activities or what services needs to be created in order to ensure that the backend service is up and running. So it starts with the deployment. What is the name of the deployment? Tire, so on and so forth. Specs, what specifications are required. Moving down, init container, and then that was about the deployment part. Sorry, I think the screen is froze. Okay, no. Yeah, that was about deployment. What activities needs to be performed in the deployment, and this is the service manifestation file. What service needs to be created once the deployment is done. So this is a typical development process wherein we need to define different manifestation like deployment, service, so on and so forth. So this is a typical process which we do it once and keep on improving based on the need. So that we cannot bypass. Scaffold won't understand it without these manifest files. That was about the manifest file, and then I mentioned about the source, right? So within source we have backend folder and front end folder, and this is the code for front end, and any change that happens which doesn't require any compilation would automatically start reflecting into the pod. And if the backend is Java based backend, probably it will still go through the build cycle and automatic deployment cycle, but for others it won't. So that is about it. Now, okay, before jumping, any questions? If not, that is all from my side. I think we still have 6 minutes left for Q&A. You can ask any question. If you don't come up with any questions immediately, you can always find me in this area for next few hours. After that, if you still want to connect, feel free to reach out and connect on my social media.
Okay, there is one question.
Okay.
How the file is syncing?
Okay, so that is an internal mechanism that Scaffold carries out. So Scaffold monitors. Sorry? It will. So you are aware about the GitHub hooks, right? how does Git, your Jenkins or any CI orchestrator understands there is a change in. So on the similar lines, Skaffold has implemented similar implementation which looks into the folder, continuously checks if there is a update in any of the file, and it will try to deploy it or copy it within your folder if it doesn't work because of the changes like binaries or you need to compile those. That would still go back and get into the build cycle if it is a small HTML change which doesn't require compilation. It will start reflecting immediately.
Okay, I think
I
that, okay,
have-
there's one more question. One more.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Vishnu. So I have a question like, so consider there are 5 developers having access to the source code registry. So how do I know who pushed the code?
So that can be done through the commit part, right? Skaffold is not pushing your code into GitHub.
Who's
It
making,
is ju- it
who's
is-
making the changes? Like how do I know who's making the changes?
So if there is a single development environment for 5 developers, then it's a pity. Ideally, every developer should have their own development environment because there is a lot of challenges around people working on same code. You need to merge, so on and so forth. So it is always wise to have a single development environment for a single developer. And once they start pushing their changes into GitHub, that is how you can understand who made the change. Did I answer your question, Vishnu?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, there's one more
Okay,
hand raised.
one more. We'll wrap up with this question and then you can sync up offline.
Hi, my name is Rahul. You said no, there is only one environment and one environment for dev for one code like that. So, but he's asked for the commit ID, right? So we should have only one repo, right?
Yes, but Skaffold is not pushing your changes into or committing your changes in. That is the philosophy. It is not committing it for you. It is just copying your files into the running pod.
But you're saying if you have 20 developers, we need 20 dev environments?
Ideally, that is how it has to be, right? Because how would you get independence?
No, if it is in a, let's say I'm using Azure DevOps and I have a development environment, all the dev teams can work on that, right?
That brings in a lot of other kind of challenges. That is also possible.
Okay.
But again, with single dev environment, if I recollect my older days, you still have your own username with which you log in.
Yeah, but developers can do their work on local and then they can do that into the dev. I mean, saying to the ADO or whatever.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
The developer can do their changes in the local
Yes.
and then they can push into the dev environment which is there in cloud or.
So, but even if you are trying to push it into any of the environment, won't there be a need for you to validate? And how would you validate that without building it and deploying it?
Yeah,
Right?
that's true. But let's say if that dev environment is there, right? So that person can evaluate in the local and if it is fine only, it will go to dev.
So, Skaffold will help you optimize the process on the local part, not on the development environment or any higher environment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll wrap up the Q&A session for that, and you can reach out to him directly, and actually we in fact encourage you to reach out to the speakers directly.